All right. I actually recorded the first half of this video earlier, and it's just got a little bit too ranty for me. And I think today is a non ranting day. We can have a little spice, of course, but, when you go a little too far, sometimes you got to just, put it behind you, delete it, put it in the trash, and start over again. But I wanted to talk about social justice, Christians, and communists and socialists, and that's why I have who I have on the screen here. This is Tim Keller. And Tim Keller he gets worse and worse as time goes by. He's been a socialist pretty much his entire life. There's just no question about it. But I just started thinking, part of my book is about the fact that the social justice movement is primarily a political movement that gets politics exactly wrong. It gets politics upside down. And there's two problems with this. So the first problem is the more important problem. When you get politics wrong and government wrong, you dishonor Christ, right? So what you dishonor God and the commands that he's given when you say that you should do reparations, even though the Bible clearly disallows such a thing, that's a sin against God, and that's the most important thing. Obviously God's system works. We know that. But we're not thinking pragmatically here and just going with whatever we think works the best. No, we want to honor Christ in our government. And so when you get politics completely wrong the way a man like Tim Keller does, the way that every social justice warrior does, you dishonor Christ, and that's the first problem. The second problem, though, is that Christ knows what works. So, how could we be so arrogant to think that we could pragmatically do better than Christ? Christ knows what works. And so, even if you are thinking pragmatically, it makes sense to obey the creator of the universe because, presumably, the creator of the universe knows better than we do about how to govern, how to rule. The government rests on his shoulders, not mine. And so I want to seek to get my opinions out of this as much as possible. Obviously, that's a very difficult task, but that's the task of a Christian. We need to see what God says, not so much what I say. You see what I'm saying? So politics is just one of those things that we kind of have this idea that it's like, we shouldn't divide over politics. No. We actually should, though, because God is very deeply concerned with politics. And so social justice warriors get this upside down, and it hurts the very people that they claim to want to help. That's the problem. So even if you're thinking pragmatically, of course we want to do what God says to honor him, but God knows best. God knows how to help the poor the best. And so we should follow God's rules, not these systems where we got to seek to increase access to healthcare, welfare, reparations, all this stuff. And it's like every single one of those plans, it sounds great, but you got to do it God's way. You can't do it by extracting taxes from people, or worse, printing money out of thin air. Printing money out of thin air is worse than taxes, in my opinion, because it's still a tax. It's a secret tax. And the thing is, God is very concerned with the soundness of money. God again and again talks about governments or people that create money by adding elements to the gold that's not gold to increase the amount of gold. He talks about this kind of stuff regularly, and it's a very grievous sin to destroy the soundness of money. It's actually stealing, and that's what inflation is. And people are always complaining about, there's a disparity, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And, they always say it because they're promoting some kind of ridiculous scheme. But that's actually true. This is something that actually does happen, and it happens precisely because of those schemes. So we just passed a $1.9 trillion bailout, welfare program, whatever you want to call it, universal basic income, stimulus, whatever you want to call it. And obviously it's going to cost way more than $1.9 trillion at the end of the day. But these numbers, we throw it around. It's like, yeah, it's just going to cost a few extra bucks. No, 1.9 trillion. These are numbers we cannot comprehend, right? We cannot comprehend it. Get this. We just passed a new spending bill of $1.9 trillion. The government takes in taxes 3 point something trillion dollars. So it's just we obviously can't pay for this. You can't tax people enough to pay for the amount of stuff that we're going for. And then there's going to be more stuff behind this, reparations, infrastructure bills, all kinds of stuff. We spend way more money than we have. Now, when you're in a family and you don't have the money to spend on something, sometimes people go into debt, but oftentimes families are smart and they start saving money. So like during the coronavirus pandemic situation last year, we didn't know what if it was going to be serious or what. Lots of families started saving more money because they wanted to have money for later. The reason they did that is because that's logical. When you see a storm coming, you prepare for the storm. You batten down the hatches. But that's not how government works. And by the way, Republicans and Democrats are both guilty of this. This is not either or, although the Democrats are more insane when it comes to this. So the Republicans do this too. The Democrats just do it more. Anyway, the point is, how do we pay for this stuff? Well, they just print money. They just print money out of thin air. They don't even print it anymore. It's just all digital. And they say, okay, now we have this much money in our money supply, so we can just have whatever we want. I mean, like this is like magic. I mean, we don't have the money for it, so let's just get the money for it. Yeah, there you go. And it's like that doesn't work though, because what that does is it brings price inflation. Now, the government has ways to hide price inflation. They've got all kinds of weaselly tactics to sort of make it seem like it's only like 2% a year, as if that's good. 2% a year is not good. What inflation really is your money is worth less by that percentage every year. So when the government says we want 2% inflation, what they're saying is we want your money to be worth less by 2% this year than it was last year. That's not good. But what's worse is real inflation, which the real inflation rate is almost like 10%. So that's insane. Like if you save $100,000 in the bank account, next year, if you have it in your account, you'll still have $100,000, but it'll only be able to buy you $90,000 worth of stuff, and so on and so on and so on. It's horrible. It's not a good thing. And what is the problem with that, right? Here's the problem. Policies that we want to have these programs to help the poor, they screw the poor over because by making the money worth less, that hurts the poor way more. Why? Why is that? Because everybody's feeling the bite, right? Yeah, that's true. Everybody's feeling the bite, but poor people, they go to the grocery store, they buy their goods, they can buy less with the same money every year that passes, right? You probably have experienced this. You go to the store and all of a sudden, like your cart is half full, but you've already spent what you spent last year. It's like insane the amount of price inflation that we have. But rich people, they go to the same stores and they pay the same prices, so they've got that. But the difference is that rich people own assets. They own house or houses. They own stocks and companies and things of this nature. And the thing is, price inflation actually inflates those prices as well. Your home value is inflated. Your rents are, if you're like a renter, you rent houses to people, those prices are also inflated. The stock market prices are super inflated, especially the NASDAQ, and we talk about these things every so often. And so when you own assets, you are keeping up or even exceeding the rate of inflation, so you get richer and richer and richer and richer. Meanwhile, people that don't own any assets, people that are poor, they're renters, or maybe they own a small home or something like that, they don't own any assets, so they actually just the only thing they feel with the inflation is the bite. They don't get the benefits of the inflation. So this disparity thing, yes, it exists, and of course there's always going to be a disparity between rich and poor, but these schemes of the government where they just create money out of thin air, there's a reason God hates that stuff. There's a reason he speaks against it in the scripture so regularly. It's because it screws over the poor people more than anybody. That's the problem. And so social justice advocates and Democrats and communists, like the one you see on the screen here, because they detach themselves from the scripture when it comes to this issue, they end up actually hurting the very people that they claim they want to help. Now, there's two options. Either they just claim they want to help them and really don't care about them so much, or they're so ignorant that they're accidentally hurting the poor people. I have got my suspicions about Tim Keller. However, it doesn't matter what side of it they fall on. They are still hurting the poor people, and we need to come against them for that, especially if we love Christ, especially if we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves. We must reject all of these communist schemes, because all of these communist schemes work the same way. They hurt the poor the most. They hurt the middle class also, not as bad, but then they enrich the rich, because the rich can take advantage of all of these schemes. They can see it coming and all that kind of stuff. They own assets and things like that. So it's not an innocent problem. You know, it's not like, oh, it's just a political disagreement. No, it's not just a political disagreement. It's actually critical to get this right, because if you are a Christian and you claim the name of Christ and you advocate things that are hurting the poor, God doesn't have very kind words for that kind of thing. In fact, let's talk about kind words. Here's Tim Keller talking about how we brought it on ourselves that we're going to be purged from government and schools. I think he's kind of right, but let's just see what he has to say.
I would say for the last
Hold on.
20 years, the Christian right, though I usually would agree with their positions. I'm pro-life. You know, in other words, I still don't think that same-sex marriage is a good idea for the country or people. So I would technically be agreeing with them, but you know how they raise their money for 20 years. They sent out letters talking about how you've got to send us money because the gay people are going to try to come and take your children away, and because they're evil, and because Democrats and the left are going to destroy your religious liberty. They just said awful things and vilified people. It's one of the reasons why so many gay activists now just don't want to forgive evangelicals, because when they had a little more power in the 80s and 90s, that's how they raised their money. That's how they got people out. And weirdly enough, that's not the Christian way at all. The Christian way at all is the way up is down. The way to rule is to serve. This is how Jesus did it. The way to get happy is to not think about your own happiness, but the happiness of others. You know, the way to get any influence is to empty yourself and be a servant. That's Jesus' way. And they're not doing that. They're actually using the Nietzschean way. And I think what that did was by for a long time just keeping evangelicals frothing at the mouth about how everything is going so bad and making everybody so angry. By the way, things are getting bad for evangelicals. It's very possible. I am not in denial.
Listen to this magician spell, and this is a word spell, okay? And I'm not just using rhetoric. This is a word spell. Do you understand what he's just said? He's saying, it's so terrible for Christians to say things are getting bad, and they're just frothing. You see how he makes it like we're beasts, like things are getting bad, you know, like we're some kind of demons. And then he's like, well, things are getting bad, and he's like, yes, they are. So you can't. What he seems like he's trying to say is here. Yes, things are exactly like you predicted they would be, Christians, but you have to be emotionless about it. You have to be like Spock the Vulcan. Like you just have to be calm about it and accept it. And it's just he grounds that in the character of Christ. And the thing is, I've said this so many times on the channel. It's that people like Tim Keller and pretty much everyone in Big Eva have this one-dimensional view of Christ that makes him like Spock. It makes him like the Vulcan Spock, where everything's like, well, it's just not logical. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not. Christ wasn't like that. We see a different kind of Christ in the scripture. We see a Christ who's meek and tender and mild and all that kind of stuff. And then we see a Christ who gets down when it's time to get down. And he probably raised his voice like we see it in the scripture. Christ preached in the streets. Have you ever seen a street preacher? They raise their voice. We see a Christ that made a whip of cords and drove people out of the temple. That wasn't a calm and just sort of, it's not logical to do this. It's not logical. It wasn't like that. We see a Christ who's got passion and zeal. And then when we talk, let's think about the book of Revelation for a second. Christ is speaking to the churches, and he's got these letters, and he says, you tolerated that woman Jezebel. And it's like, do you think he just said that was like, and the main problem here is that you tolerated Jezebel. And it's like, no, Tim Keller, no. That might work for you. And this is fine. Everyone has different personalities and mentalities. Like, in fact, when I was in New York City, I went to Tim Keller's church. And I was very attracted to the school professor style that Tim Keller has when he's preaching. I was attracted to that. And so I can understand if you find that attractive. I'm not gonna deny that. But we cannot make Tim Keller's style the standard here. You see what he's saying? You guys said that we're just evil. They are! I was evil! You gotta feel that in your bones. When I was a pagan living in New York City, I was fornicating. I was doing all kinds of drugs. I was a wicked man, and I needed to hear that I was a wicked man. I needed to hear that. Not everyone can have this professor style of just presenting. I'm just going to give you the facts, and then you do with it what you will. No, that's not what we see presented in the scripture. It's just simply not. And by the way, like, yes, I agree. People need to be converted to Christ, and that's the way to change a nation and to change a nation's laws and stuff like that. But even that's not the only style we see in the scripture. We see leaders being raised up by Christ, making reforms top down as well, and it's commended. It's commended. So I'm not opposed to making reforms top down. In fact, well, let's just let him finish. But you see how I'm getting animated about this. And the reason I'm getting animated about this is I disagree completely that what we need now are more preachers that look like and sound like robots that talk to you like you're a professor and everything's in the theoretical. No, we need fire in the belly. That's what we need right now. We need courageous men who are willing to go up to Herod and say, no, you can't have your brother's wife. Yes, I respect you as a ruler, but you still have to go to God. You still have to obey Christ. That's what we need right now. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to do it, but you see, the thing is, like Tim is almost saying, like, that's our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is we're too bold. Does anyone in their right mind think that the church's biggest problem is that they're too bold?
About the fact that 10 years from now, if you have evangelical convictions about sex and gender, you may not be able to work for a major university or for the government or for a big corporation. And it's not that Christians haven't faced that other places and in the past. We shouldn't be crybabies. Nevertheless, having said all that, yeah, we nurtured this, and Christian nationalists use that, and therefore we brought it on ourselves. Even though I agree with Perry and Whitehead.
Yeah, Christian nationalists, there's just so many Christian nationalists out there, and they brought it upon themselves for standing for Christ too much. And it's like, Tim Keller he's so good at confusing the issues on purpose. He does it on purpose. This is a wizard spell because he's telling you, yeah, it's really bad, and we're not going to be able to work and stuff like that, but it's the Christian nationalists that did it. And actually, I kind of agree with him in the sense that we did kind of bring this upon ourselves. I was watching a cross-politic episode just yesterday where they're talking to a guy. It's the one about the Equality Act. And Chocolate Knox was talking about the Civil Rights Act, and they were talking about how the Civil Rights Act probably should not exist because we don't want the government to start defining who the protected classes are, right? Like, if you want to be an idiot and ban Puerto Ricans from your restaurant, that's on you. Excuse me. That's on you. You should be allowed to be an idiot, and I should be allowed to not go to your restaurant. You know what I mean? Yes. We don't want the government involved here because by supporting the Civil Rights Act because of our tender hearts, and we knew that it was wrong to be racist, it's wrong to be sexist. Christians know that. And so, yes, we know that. But the problem is that then we go and turn to our real God, the government, to help us with this. And that's not what we should be doing. That's not how it works, right? The government is not allowed to get involved in personal interactions like that. If you look at the scripture, there's no law that says the government's duty is to make sure that everybody's not racist. You know what I mean? Like, that's not part of the government. Just with a couple things. The government has the sword to punish evildoers. You steal, you get restitution. You kill, you get executed. You know, things of that nature. Very basic stuff. But then if you get the government involved in all the personal interactions and you can't be racist, otherwise I'm going to get the government involved. See, we appealed to our real God to take care of us at that moment during the Civil Rights Act. And now the government is turning around on us. And now we're the ones that are going to be discriminated against and because of our beliefs. So you can't have these beliefs, otherwise it's discriminatory. By the way, you already gave us this power to decide who's a protected class and who isn't and how to protect them. So we kind of did bring that upon ourselves because that act was not godly. It's good to not be racist, but that act was not godly. Very good, interesting point to think about. So I agree with him in that sense. But you see how a weasel like this? This is weaselly, guys. Well, yeah, I totally agree. Things are bad just like you all predicted. But it's actually your fault because you predicted it too harshly, too aggressively. You said too many things about, sure, marrying another man is a bad idea, but you called them evil. I mean, that's the problem. You see, you're the problem for calling that evil, even though it is not the best. It's not God's best for you. The last thing we need right now in this moment is more mealy-mouthed people, mincing words, and soft peddling things and all this kind of stuff. Look, if you are attracted to this kind of a style, I don't have any beef with you, right? I don't have any beef with you. We need Ezras as well. I'm not saying Tim Keller's an Ezra. I think Tim Keller is a political operative first and foremost. That's his mission. So I'm not saying Tim Keller's an Ezra, but if you've got a pastor that's like Tim Keller, in the way he presents information and all that kind of stuff, and he's actually teaching God's law, because that's the thing, that's the difference. Ezra taught God's law. Tim Keller tries to get around God's law. So if you've got an Ezra, that's fine. But let's not let the Ezras despise the Nehemiahs that pull people's beards out and beat them and stuff like that, metaphorically speaking. We need fire in the belly too, especially at this moment, because people are going to be falling away. People are going to feel the pressure that is put on them, the economic pressure, the pressure in general. They're going to start to feel that pressure, and it's going to be very tempting to just release all that pressure and say, I'm going to be a Christian secretly. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. I'm not going to make a big deal. I'm just going to go mind my own business, and that's that. I need a job to feed my family. Guys like Tim Keller aren't going to help you in that moment. We need people that are full of grace and faith and boldness for Christ, to let people know that it's okay to just believe what's real. You don't have to go with the lie in order to survive, because your portion is the Lord. He will protect you. He will provide for you. Life might not be as easy as it could be, but it's worth it to live in the truth of Christ's reality. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.